In 1025 AD, King of Chola, Rajendra Chola came with his army to attack the ports of Srivijaya. Like the famous Mongol Khanate, the Cholas were very brutal in warfare. No man, woman, and children were spared, and all the buildings were destroyed. The result of this attack was the jealousy of said king, as Srivijaya had the Malacca port, becoming the main gateway for the trade among the other nations. However, this was not the only reason for this attack. It is known that the Malay Srivijaya Maharajas knew about their intention, as between the year 996 and 1021 AD, the Malay Srivijayan Maharajas have provided assistance to Sri Lanka that was under Anuradhapura, fighting against Rajendra Chola, who was at war with them at the time. This rivalry can still be seen with the Tamils and Sinhalese clans. Sangrama Vijayatunga was a Malay Srivijaya Maharaja that was ruling the nation. When Rajendra Chola attacked his kingdom, he was captured and brought back to Chola. Samara Vijayatunga, his younger brother, replaced him as the ruler of the occupied Srivijaya shortly after. Within a span of 20 years, many ports were occupied by Rajendra Chola. To many people, it marked the end of the once glorious Srivijayan Empire, just as when the sea people conquered Egypt. However, Samara Vijayatunga started to overcome this huge obstacle and started to attack the Cholas. In 1044 AD, Maharaja Samara Vijayatunga sent his prince, called Purandara, to kill Rajendra Chola. After Rajendra Chola's death, Samara Vijayatunga was said to proclaim himself as the Maharaja of Srivijaya and free from the occupation of the Cholas. His prince, Purandara, reconquered the ports occupied by the Cholas. After his success, Samara Vijayatunga went to Sri Lanka, now under Polonnaruwa, to assist them in ousting the Cholas and made it independent from the occupation of the Cholas. Maharaja Samara Vijayatunga created a joint army together with Sri Lanka under Polonnaruwa with the soon-to-be king Prince Kasyapa. The Sri Lankan capital of Anuradhapura was first to be free from occupation. After that success, the Malay Srivijayan Raja went to assist Raja Panya, who was named Sundra Panya, to free his city, Madura, from Chola occupation. Having that said, effectively, Maharaja Samara Vijayatunga had created an alliance between three nations that gave birth to the Malay Srivijaya Panya Anuradhapura alliance to defeat the Cholas. Having that said, effectively, Maharaja Samara Vijayatunga had created an alliance between three nations that gave birth to the Malay Srivijaya Panya Polonnaruwa alliance to defeat the Cholas. An inscription was erected to give evidence to this historic feat. This inscription was formulated in memory of Maharaja Samara, who drove Chola out of all Sri Lanka. The village of Mehendipati, which is owned by Maharaja Samara, should be given to the tenant. It should be remembered at this time we have been released by this king. He must be remembered. Our villages and lands have been released by this king. It must also be remembered that no matter how many villages he owns, how many houses and gardens he owns, the houses and gardens would remain uninhabited without any court officials invading their rights and plundering them. After the death of Rajendra Chola, Virarajendra had become the new Raja. However, he was not as effective as his predecessors. It is noted that Virarajendra had two princes. Rebellion and civil war ensued after the death of Rajendra Chola. One of the princes, called Adarajendra, had squashed the rebellion and put an end to the conflict, and had been placed as the future successor of the Chola Empire. The other prince, Kulotanga, was upset by this decision, as he was promised the throne before those conflicts began. Disappointed, Kulotanga left the Chola Empire. He tried to occupy Panya subsequently after and was thoroughly defeated. He then went on to seek assistance from the Khmer Empire to occupy Panya, but was defeated again the second time. As a result of successive defeats, he went to Sri Lanka and was made a governor by the Raja of Polonnaruwa. His burning desire to become king was never gone. As such, he sought help from the Malay Srivijaya Empire under Samara Wijayatunga, and then he sent his prince called Manabrana to help him. Prince Manabrana was careful in approaching the Cholas. He had concluded that fighting against the Cholas thousands of miles from Srivijaya was ineffective. As such, he had built a base for his army about 260 miles from Chola that is located in the north of Sri Lanka. Furthermore, the Sri Lankan Raja was in gratitude towards the Srivijayans as they had helped them from the occupation of the Cholas. From there onwards, Manabrana requested aid from Sundarapanya, who was the Raja of Panya Kingdom, to help Kolotonga defeat the Cholas. Originally, Sundarapanya felt it was a burden, as he was annoyed that he should help Kolotonga after he had attacked him twice before this. However, Manabrana managed to persuade Sundarapanya and made him agree to it. The diplomacy shown by Manabrana runs in the Malays as a people, and he had made it an asset and a weapon to fight against their enemies. During the formation of alliance between various different kingdoms and empires, Raja Virarajendra passed on, and Raja Adirajendra have claimed the throne to proclaim himself as the new Raja for the Chola Empire. After receiving news of these alliances, the Raja sought help from their main army from a Tamil kingdom called Chalukya to defend the Cholas, and thus they accepted their proposition. Just as the three kingdoms of China had Shu, Wu, and Wei, the Cholas, Chalukyas, and Panyas also had the same animosity against one another. With the knowledge that the Cholas were unhappy with the new self-proclaimed new king, Manabrana made a surprise attack towards the Chola city capital, Gangakundapura. This attack made the Chalukyan army lose their morale and scatter away. Manabrana confronted the Chola nobles and commanded them to surrender to the Srivijayan Empire or face absolute destruction. In the book titled Chinese Texts Describing or Referring to the Chola Kingdom as Zunian, the Cholas were said to be ruled under Malay Srivijayan Maharaja, explained as Diwakara. In the text of the Journal of the Southeast Asian History of Singapore, September of 1964, it is recorded that the inscription in a temple in Guangzhou was aided by the Raja of Diwakara, and it is said that the Maharaja for Diwakara was the Malay Srivijaya Empire. After this event, Prince Kolotonga became the Raja for Chola and finally managed to claim the throne. Manabrana went back to Srivijaya and as his mission was complete in aiding Kolotonga to become the new Raja of Chola. What we learned from Srivijaya Chola War. The Cholas were like the Mongols in naval history, very brutal and left out nobody alive when they attacked. The Cholas are nobodies in the present Malaysia and Indonesia history. They have no history here and left nothing to be proud of. Cholas are not even written in our history books. They remain as a nobody and only remain as a tool to be used by people to glorify a Chola kingdom. That they had conquered Southeast Asia when factually there were nobodies in the region, not even close to the bin of history. The Malay Srivijayan Empire had never given up. Even after the destruction led by the Cholas, they managed to beat them and even conquered their territory. The diplomacy shown by Srivijaya proved that it was a remarkable nation, as it manages to create an alliance between the enemies. Even when they were winning, they did not cause further destruction to the Chola Empire. As the Chola Empire, even when they caused them misery. In fact, they placed a new king for them and stopped any more attacks after their surrender. Unlike the Cholas that caused destruction and chaos en route to capturing Srivijaya, the Srivijayans had came with a diplomatic proposition that would be beneficial to both countries. The Cholas were spared from more bloodshed and got a new Raja, whilst the Srivijayans managed to secure their borders from any more attacking forces from southern India. The Srivijayan diplomacy would continue to a huge legacy and contribution to the Malay as it is shown many times in history again during the Malacca Empire, British colonization, and when gaining independence to form Malaysia.